encourage all of you in the room to follow us on social media. We've got Instagram, YouTube, Facebook for your parents, and TikTok. So we encourage you guys all to follow us and check out all the good things we got going on, right?
I need you all to listen to this because you won't want to forget it. On the 31st, we're having BCC Youth, and we are going to be watching Big Hero 6.
Movie nights! Listen, that's going to be so much fun. So we've been in this series called Stories, and what better way to end the series than with the story of Big Hero 6? You guys need to check out this week's new podcast episode, our Complete Student Podcast. Our guest this week, his name was Nathan May, and he is talking about how to be a team player and a coachable person. He's a head soccer coach over at Westside High School, and yeah, so you guys should check it out. So next week, we've been talking about this over the last month, but we started a care project about a month ago supporting some missionary friends of ours in China, and next week, they're going to be here with us. Our Chinese missionaries, they're going to be here. It's going to be awesome. We're excited to have them. Their names are John and Sarah Hamilton. So they're going to be here, and they're going to share their story of what they're doing and the work they're doing in China. So we encourage you guys to come, be a part of it, and continue to give to our care project so that we can reach our goal. So we are doing an upperclassmen retreat coming up next month, April 16th through the 18th. Guys, it is legit. We've rented a sweet house, Airbnb, about 2 hours away from here. We're getting away for the weekend. We're going to have a great time, and it's just for you guys. So all of our upperclassmen, the registration is going to be available this Friday. You can find it on our Instagram and our link tree. So make sure you go register for that, be a part of it. Cost us $40, but it's going to be a heck of a good time. So we'd love to see you guys there.
So I guess I'll start from the very beginning. So I grew up in a very Christian household. I mean, I have African parents, and if any of you guys have African parents, it just means you grew up in a very Christian household. And I grew up knowing that God loved me and that God can do the impossible. So throughout all of elementary school, I mean, I didn't really have any problems, and I believed in God only because, not because I wanted to, but because that's just how I was raised, and I'm still thankful for that. But it wasn't until about 6th grade that my parents decided to put me into a youth group at Glad Tidings, which was my old church, now Good News. But I didn't really learn that much there just because I didn't really want to. I mean, I didn't really care about it at all. And then around 7th grade, my parents decided to move all of us to Bellevue Christian Center and put me in the youth group there. So it was shelter back then, and that was for junior high. And that was such an awesome time for me because that's when I first really learned about having a relationship with God, and that it was more than just some guy in the sky who like snaps his fingers and makes things happen just because you pray for it. So I learned that he knows me by my name, that he knows the amount of hairs on my head, and I was so fascinated by this. So like I would go to school every single day and tell everyone about it, and they would start to call me God Girl because I would talk so much about it, but I didn't even care. I was so fascinated by it. And so then about the summer of my 8th grade year, if any of you guys know Miranda Saltzman, now Miranda Hatcher, and Abby Higgs, they convinced me to go to my first week-long, which is a summer camp here. And so I didn't really have much going on in my life except for I just kind of had this boundary between me and God, and I couldn't really break it. So fast forward a little bit, week-long was amazing that year. I broke that boundary with God. I got slain in the Holy Spirit, and I even got baptized, and it was just amazing. It was life-changing, seriously. And so I came home from that thinking like, okay, well, my life is perfect now. Like, everything's good. And I think that's a big misconception that a lot of Christians have, is that once you become saved or once you become baptized, like, everything's perfect again. And I didn't realize that until it just wasn't good again. So it was about the summer of my freshman year where everything really just started to go downhill. The devil was just kind of spewing a lot of hate and a lot of lies into my life. So he started spewing just lies about my femininity, my sexuality, my purpose, just who I was as a person. He just kept tearing me down. And at this time, I didn't really believe in depression or anxiety or anything. I kind of just thought it was something that people would use to get attention, or just, it was something that was fake to me. That's what I thought it was until I had it. So around this time, I had very, very severe depression, and I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I couldn't watch my favorite shows anymore. Every day I was crying. Like I couldn't breathe at that point. And so my second week long comes around, and I was like, okay, well, the last week long I went to, you know, it was life changing, like it's gonna happen again. So I went in there with really big expectations, and just nothing happened. And that was so heartbreaking for me to like go out of that second week long still with these problems. And this kept going from the summer of my freshman year all up until 2020 actually. So if any of you guys knew me as this really like happy, bubbly girl, I was really severely depressed, and I was even very, very suicidal at that time. And I just remember like I couldn't do my own schoolwork because I kept thinking like, well, I'm not even gonna make it to graduation. Like, I don't wanna make it to graduation. I'm not gonna live anymore. And so it was around quarantine in 2020, April, that I just sat in my car and I drove to this lake, and I just sat and talked to God, and I said, am I really highly favored like you said? Do you even really love me? Like, why me? Like, why is it me that's going through this? I hear success stories about people whose lives change and they get out of this depression, but why isn't it happening to me, you know? And so I just heard God talk to me, and it wasn't that I wasn't highly favored, it was because I was trying to take these problems on my own. What God really wanted me to do was to run to Him. You know, when we have problems as children, we go to our parents, and that's what God is. He's our Father. He wanted me to run to Him with everything and give Him all of my burdens and to seek Him first. When I was praying, it was more like, hey, God, can you take this problem away? But if not, I can try and fix it on my own. And I think that when I was going through all of that, that's what Jesus was trying to tell me. And I think now I'm so, so grateful for all of that, because now I learned to just give Him my problems and to trust that He wants to walk that storm with me. He doesn't give us a storm that we can't weather, but He wants us to know that He's going to be there with us that entire time. And so now I have this awesome testimony that I can share with people and show them that God is right by our side every single day.
What's up, BCC Youth? Thank you for joining us online. I'm Jackson. I'm the intern here at BCC Youth. I've been doing this for a couple months now. I just got hired in late January of this year. It was really awesome for me. I've felt the call of ministry on my life for a long time. For the past 4 years, I've been doing ministry in various ways, and to finally be able to step up and be an intern here and take my 9 to 5 here at the church for you guys, setting up events and services and writing messages like this, it's just a dream come true. So I want to share with you guys today a little bit about a few questions I've been asking for almost my whole life. Something to know about me as we just get started is I love to ask questions. I'm very inquisitive. I've always wanted to find the what, the how, the who, and the where. And two questions that I've been asking my whole life as I've been in church and been in ministry in different ways. And this is where I kind of get serious is, do I belong here? Is this really my crowd? Is this my scene? Do I belong with these people? Am I really a church kid? And I've also asked so many times, is Jesus enough? When things really get difficult, when life starts to turn the wrong way, is Jesus going to be enough for me? Do I belong here? Is Jesus enough? And I've spent my whole life in church. You know, I grew up in a church family. I went to church, and now I'm in ministry full time. And it's still a question that comes up is, do I belong here? Is Jesus enough? So I just want to talk to you if maybe you've asked that for yourself. If maybe that's something that's crossed your mind at some point. Do I really belong in church? Should I really be there? Is Jesus going to be enough for me when it gets real? I want to talk to you right now. Just pray with me. God, thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for your word. I pray that you are heard in this time, that your heart is communicated. Jesus, we love you. Amen. So have you ever been in a situation where you realized, oh, I don't belong here? Have you just been somewhere and it occurred to you, this is not where I'm supposed to be? That happened to me when I was first learning to drive. I don't know about you, but I didn't get driver's ed. I had to learn with my dad. And I remember first learning to drive, and it was really difficult. My dad's a great teacher, but it was still very stressful. And I remember one time I was driving from the church over to Starbucks. And if you know the area, I was driving down on Cornhusker, and I approached the intersection where you've got Raising Cane's to your right and Dino's Storage to your left. And I was going to turn left at that intersection and go straight to Starbucks. My dad thought I was going to go straight and wait to turn till Walmart and Applebee's and turn over there and then go to Starbucks. But my dad, being the man of efficiency that he is, was multitasking and teaching me to drive while he was also checking emails on his phone. And so he thinks I'm going straight. I get into the turn lane and I have a green light. Not a green arrow, mind you, so I have to wait for traffic to pass and then I can go. And when I was first learning to drive, just to make sure I was doing everything right, I was narrating myself. And so I would say, like, okay, I'm approaching the intersection, I'm slowing down because they have the right of way. And my dad, without looking up from his phone, says, no, you have the right of way, you can go. And so I was like, okay, I guess I do. And so I start turning and I look over and there is a car barreling towards me at 45 miles an hour on Cornhusker about to collide. And it just occurred to me in that moment, I don't think I belong here. I don't think I'm supposed to be in this place and time right now. This doesn't feel right. And my dad feels us turning. He looks up. He sees what's happening. He grabs the wheel from me. My hands leave the wheel. He turns right for us and we go straight down the wrong way on Cornhusker. So we're now playing chicken with these people, 45 miles an hour. We're gonna die. And my dad is screaming. He says, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. My hands aren't on the wheel. You're the one driving, Dad. And he says, hit the gas. So I hit the gas and he drives, he hops the median. We get back on the right side of Cornhusker. We went to Starbucks. I got him a Frappuccino and we haven't talked about it since. But I knew in that moment, as I'm playing chicken with these people, driving down on Cornhusker, going the wrong way, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't belong in this situation right now. Throughout my life, I've just been obsessed with the idea of belonging. I want to know what it means to belong. And Webster has a lot of different definitions, but one that I love is to belong is to be part of something. To be part of something. I think we all have that desire to be part of something, to belong somewhere. I think we want community involvement. A lot of people find that in school with classmates or in work with coworkers or sports if you have, teammates that you work with or family, One thing that I realized was I found a lot of community in my jobs over the years. And to get a job, you need to go through an interview process. So to find that community and that involvement, that belonging, you have to sit down with someone, you have to interview, and they're going to ask you questions that decide if you meet the qualifications for the position you're applying for. They're going to ask you things about your motives for the job, things about your character, to see if you meet the standard of who they want working there. When I first got hired at Chick-fil-A, I sat down with Tom Deal, the owner-operator there, and he asked me a lot of questions to decide if I was going to be the right guy for Chick-fil-A. And if you want to know about the questions that he asked me, you can go check out our podcast, the Complete Student Podcast, where we interviewed my former boss, Tom Deal, and he talked about those very qualifications that I had to meet back in the day. And I remember when I left Chick-fil-A and I went to Starbucks, I had to meet their qualifications too. And then when I came here at Bellevue Christian Center, I had to meet those qualifications. Everywhere had standards and staff codes to get that job. So I guess the question comes up, what are God's qualifications? If you want to be in relationship with Him, if you just want to connect to God, what are His qualifications? Think about it. I think that as we begin to ponder that, we get all the wrong answers coming into our heads. I've heard, you have to read the Word, you have to be in the presence, you have to serve, you have to tithe, you have to go to church 3 times a week, And I think we're getting the picture wrong, because all of those things are good things that we have to do at some point. But entry level, to get into a relationship with God, to be with God, to meet Him at an altar, you don't need any of that. I think that we get so confused with what we think a church kid is, and then we assert those qualifications onto God. We project our idea of what God wants in a Christian, and we say that's what God says. And because God says it, I can't be a Christian. I can't go to church because I don't belong here. I don't read my Bible. I haven't prayed in months. I don't serve. I don't give. I'm just not the kind of person who belongs here. I think we have our own ideas of what God's standards are. And I think God's standards look completely different than what we think they do. Jesus was always confusing people with His crowd, with the people He would choose to hang out with, and no one understood why He was hanging out with these people. I know I wasted so much of my life being confused because I wanted to be with God, and I didn't understand. I didn't feel like I met the qualifications, but God still wanted to be with me. Letting go of my perfectionism was really a learning curve. I had to adapt and understand that God loves me where I'm at, and that was difficult for me because I thought I had to be this certain level of righteousness, this certain level of good, this certain level of church kid if I was going to be with Jesus. And that just wasn't true, and it didn't make sense at the time to me. And I think God rarely ever makes sense in the moment. I think it takes time to understand where God's coming from. Through experience, we begin to understand God's character. I know Jesus was always confusing people around Him because He would choose to hang out with people that made no sense to anyone. Jesus was constantly spending His time with outcasts, people nobody else wanted anything to do with. His disciples were tradesmen. They shouldn't have been following a rabbi by anyone else's standards. And yet they followed Jesus closer than anyone followed any rabbi. Jesus spent time with the woman at the well who was caught in adultery. She had several husbands, and everyone else hated her. Everyone else judged her. But Jesus said, you know what? I want to be in a relationship with her. I want to talk to her. The woman who was caught in adultery, she was thrown before Jesus, and everyone else judged her. Everyone else said, we have to stone her. She's terrible. Jesus said, no, I'm in a relationship with her. No. I care about her. And it's not based on her actions or what she's done in the past, but it's based on the fact that I'm a loving God. That confused everybody. Zacchaeus, we talked about last week. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Everyone hated tax collectors, and God still spent time with him. Lepers, possessed, prostitutes, you name it. Anyone who was unpopular at the time was hanging out with Jesus. Made no sense to anyone. Jesus chose to belong with the people no one else would belong with. In Mark 2, there's a story that I think outlines this so well, and I could have chosen any story to talk about how Jesus spends time with outcasts, but I think this one in particular has a lot of power, because this isn't just Jesus calling anyone. This is Jesus calling one of his disciples, one of his core people that would follow him until he died on the cross. This was Jesus calling Levi, also known as Matthew. This was a big moment, because he wasn't just saying, hi, I'm Jesus, nice to meet you, I love you, bye. He was saying, I'm Jesus, follow me for the rest of your life. Be a disciple of mine, be in relationship with me every day, day in and day out. The story starts, it says in Mark 2:13, then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. Quick pause to note here, Jesus is already teaching people, which means everyone knows that Jesus is a man of God. They know what Jesus' status is. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting in his tax collector's booth. Remember last week, nobody likes tax collectors. Tax collectors were not popular people. So they know Jesus' status, and they know Levi's status. And Jesus said, follow me and be my disciple. So Levi got up and followed him. I think that's incredible. I want to note that Levi doesn't say, who, me? No, you got the wrong guy. I'm a tax collector. You're a man of God. I cheat people. I scam people. I steal from people. You're a giver. You're a generous God. We really don't belong together. We're not a good match. Levi just gets up and he goes. We have no record of Levi questioning this. We have no record of Levi saying, no, I can't be with you. I don't belong with you. I'm not the kind of guy you're looking for. Levi gets up and he follows Jesus. I want to know if we can emulate that heart, if we can be like Levi, and when God calls us, we can let go of what we think God's qualifications are, what God's standards are, and we can just follow him. The way Levi does in this moment, he doesn't skip a beat. He immediately says, yes, I will follow you. Yes, I will walk with you. I know my life hasn't reflected it in the past. I know I've been pretty messed up before, but today is a new day and I'll follow you. I want to be like Levi. He doesn't question it. He doesn't say, who, me? No, I think you made a mistake. He says, this is Jesus calling me, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be in relationship with God. I got to take it. I got to take it. And he follows. I think Levi knew that Jesus was enough, even if he felt like he didn't belong. Levi knew that Jesus would be enough for him, even if he felt that it wasn't right in the moment. He knew that perspective would come with time, and that over time, he would begin to understand just how much he did belong in Jesus' circle as one of Jesus' core 12 disciples. As you keep reading here, it says, later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. So this wasn't an abnormality. This wasn't crazy for Jesus. To have a tax collector over, to spend time and be in relationship with messed up sinners, broken people, lost people. That was normal. There were many people of this kind with Jesus. See, what's normal to Jesus is not normal to us. What God does every day, we do once in a while. To Jesus, this was just another day, but to us, it's an incredible story. Because that's just the kind of God that Jesus is. He spends time with people that no one else would spend time with. The Bible is filled with stories like this of people who thought they weren't qualified, that God still used in incredible ways. I know Moses didn't think he was qualified. He had a stutter. He didn't think he could speak before people. He had run away, and God still used him to free all of Israel from slavery in Egypt. Following Moses' death, Joshua, the guy that Moses raised up to be the leader of Israel after him, Joshua has to step into the shoes of Moses, one of the greatest leaders of all time, all of history, not just in the Bible, but Moses is the guy that led all of Israel out of slavery. Joshua has to step into those shoes and do what Moses couldn't, bring the Israelites into the promised land. Joshua was incredibly unqualified to do that. He was standing in the biggest shadow of all time of Moses, and yet he still led all of Israel into the promised land, into victory. I know Gideon speaks to me because he was the least of his family, and his family was the least of the nation. They were the least warrior types in all of Israel, and Israel was being bullied by Midian. And God calls Gideon to attack, to fight back, to stand up for Israel, and Gideon is so confused because he's like, why me? I'm not the kind of guy you want. I'm not the guy who belongs in the battle, but God still chose him and still frees Israel from Midian's control. David was just a shepherd's boy whose own father didn't even think that much of him. Look how incredible David is. He slayed giants. He led a nation. Jacob was a deceiver, a liar, a trickster, and he's the father of the nation of Israel. So many stories of God using people who didn't meet the standard, who weren't qualified, but just entered relationship with him, and through that found belonging that they had never had before. They all thought they didn't belong to begin with. Do you think that you don't belong? Do you think that you shouldn't be in church or in relationship with Jesus? Can I ask why? I don't know what thoughts are filling your head right now, but if it's because of sin or mistakes, you know he can heal that, right? If it's because of loss or abandonment, you know he can heal that, right? If it's because of abuse, he can heal that. Whatever's going on in your past, he can heal that. Your future can be clear. Jesus can heal it. I don't know what you've been through or what you've done, but Jesus can heal it. I don't care what it's been, it can be something new. He can heal that. So I don't know if when I asked that, if you just had a million thoughts of, oh gosh, all of this stuff that I've done, all of the mistakes that I've made, everything that I've done, I could never be with God. If you've recognized all of those mistakes, I have good news for you. We continue reading in this story. In verse 16, it says, "But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw Jesus eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, 'Why does he eat with such scum?'" Does that sound like us? Does that sound like the attitude we have towards ourselves? Keep reading. When Jesus heard this, he told them, and we really need to focus on this, guys, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. I've come not for those who think they're perfect, but for those who know that they aren't. If you've recognized everything that you've done, if you've recognized, God, I've messed up in so many ways, great news, Jesus is a healer. Jesus is a healer, and he can heal whatever it is in your past. Are you crippled by addiction? Are you overcome by depression? Are you trapped with your trauma? Let me tell you, he can heal it. He can heal it. Things can change. It's okay if you're not enough because he is. It's okay if you don't measure up because he does. God will always be enough, and he will always fill where you don't. Now, how do I know this? How do I know that Jesus is going to be enough? Just one word is Barabbas. That's how I know Jesus is enough, is the story of Barabbas. Barabbas is a character I've come to love a lot recently. So who is he? Barabbas is a murderer. He was an insurrectionist against Rome. Barabbas is a textbook bad guy. He started out with pretty good intentions, but kind of fell off and did some pretty bad stuff. And Barabbas shows up when Jesus is going to be crucified. So in the story, as Jesus is being put up against the cross, Barabbas sort of intersects, and we get to know him. So in Matthew 27:15, it says, "Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, 'Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?'" Are you kidding? This is crazy. These people are insane to compare Jesus to Barabbas. Jesus is a giver of life. Barabbas is a murderer. How can you compare these two? This is unacceptable. This is insane. This is blasphemy. But it's interesting to see that Barabbas' real name, and we don't have it in this text, but his actual full name was Yeshua Barabbas, which means Jesus, Son of God. It wasn't really all that uncommon to share names back in the day, so there were probably a lot of Yeshuas, a lot of Jesuses at the time. But Barabbas' real name was Jesus, Son of God. That's the direct translation. So I think that Barabbas was made to be a counterfeit Jesus. He was made to sit up against Jesus and be compared. Jesus the Messiah or Jesus the Son of God? Jesus Christ or Barabbas? I think they were meant to be pitted against each other in this moment. So in the people's eyes, Jesus and Barabbas, they aren't so different, really. So you keep reading in verse 20. It says, "Meanwhile, the leading priests and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked again, 'Which of these two do you want me to release to you?' The crowd shouted back, 'Barabbas.'" They choose murder over life. They choose chaos over peace. They choose Barabbas over Jesus. I don't understand. And in Matthew 27:22, it says, "So Pilate responded, 'Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?' They shouted back, 'Crucify him.' 'Why?' Pilate demanded. 'What crime has he committed?' But the mob roared even louder, 'Crucify him.' Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, 'I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours.' And all the people yelled back, 'We will take the responsibility for his death, we and our children.' So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, and then he turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified." Why is Jesus letting this happen? Why is Jesus allowing this? I don't understand. Why? Why is Jesus, Son of God, allowing himself to be crucified and letting Barabbas go free? Well, I'm not the only one who's asking, and in Mark 15:31, we hear this. "The leading priests and teachers of religious law also mocked Jesus. 'He saved others,' they scoffed, 'but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross so we can see it and believe him.' Even the men who were crucified with Jesus ridiculed him." Everyone's wondering, why aren't you saving yourself? Why are you letting this happen, Jesus? If Jesus is truly enough, why doesn't he save himself? It's because Barabbas wasn't enough. Barabbas couldn't save himself. Judah Smith said the Father would have to treat Jesus like Barabbas so he could treat Barabbas like Jesus. The whole idea was to switch places. Barabbas could go free like an innocent man, and Jesus would die a murderer's death. It was all part of God's plan. The crucifixion served one purpose: Jesus stepping in the way, taking our place, receiving the consequences for our actions. The whole idea was that Jesus would take our punishment. God knew Barabbas didn't deserve to walk free, yet he still sent his son to free him. God knew Barabbas would never respond, but he still sent his son to save him. You see, we have no record of Barabbas saying, I owe you everything now. You've saved my life. You've taken my place. I recognize that you are God. We have none of that. Barabbas just walks free. Probably goes back, incites another insurrection, kills more people. Barabbas just walks free and never really recognizes what's been given to him, the gift that God gave him. But it didn't change God's heart. Barabbas wasn't enough, so Jesus was enough for him. That's what Jesus did for us. So do you belong here? Do you belong in relationship with Jesus? Do you deserve this place with God? Have you earned a relationship with Jesus? Do you belong here? No, you didn't. And no, I didn't. And no, Barabbas didn't. None of us had earned this or deserved this. But Jesus died on a cross. And that changed everything. We're playing a completely different game now. Jesus died and took our sin. And now we can belong with him, be in relationship with him, even though we've done nothing to deserve it, nothing to earn it. Jesus sacrificed himself so people like us could belong. He died on a cross so people like us, people like Barabbas, could belong. Michelle Cobb says, your value is not determined by your mistakes. Your value is determined by the price someone was willing to pay for you. And that price was the life of the Son of God, the life of Jesus Christ. Because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still messing things up, while we were still getting things wrong, Christ died for our sins, and he took the punishment for our actions. So is Jesus enough? Well, let's consider what he's been through. Let's consider what Jesus has faced. He was whipped with this long whip that had broken glass and nails attached to the end. And they hit him with it, and they hit him with it. And it drew all of the flesh and the skin off of his back. A crown of thorns was pressed into his head. Thorns were pressed into his head. And he had to wear that. And then he had to carry his own cross to the hill where he was supposed to be crucified. And he carried it until his body collapsed under him. And then as he was hanging there, after they had pounded and pounded nails into his hands and into his feet, and he hung there, they took a spear and they stabbed his side. And he did it all for you. He did it all for me. He did it all for Barabbas. He did it all for us. I know that Jesus is enough because I was enough for him. I know that Jesus is enough for me to go through what I'm going through because I was enough for him to die on a cross. And I know that Jesus will always be enough because even for a murderer and a rebellion leader, Jesus died because that was enough for him. Even the slightest chance of a relationship with Barabbas sent Jesus to the cross to die. Had Jesus whipped and nailed to a cross and stabbed with a spear and a crown of thorns pressed into his head, it was all enough. We were enough for Jesus. Barabbas never responded to that free gift. Barabbas never responded to the amazing sacrifice that Jesus gave him. So my question is, will you respond? Will you take a look at your life and say, I've done nothing to deserve this, but I want relationship with Jesus. I want to belong in his presence. I want to belong in his word. And I want to believe with full faith and confidence that Jesus is enough for me. I'm urging you to respond. You can go to our Spotify, you can put on a worship playlist and just take some time and listen to God's voice. Listen to him speak and get to know his character because he is enough and he wants you to belong with him. I just urge you to pray this prayer, and if you have to say it over and over and over and over again until you believe it, just say, Jesus is enough and I belong. Jesus is enough and I belong with him. Jesus will be enough for me when things get tough, and I will always belong with him. Jesus is enough and I belong. Pray with me. God, I don't know how to thank you for the sacrifice that you made for me. I don't know how to respond to how you gave your life for me, to how you suffered for me just so I could belong in your presence. And I don't understand how you would do that for someone like Barabbas, for someone like me. As I know what I've done, and I've seen what Barabbas has done, and it doesn't make sense that you would die on a cross because you were the only one who was ever truly enough. Jesus, it doesn't make sense to me now. But you died for me to be in relationship, and I want to respond to that. I want to belong with Jesus. I want to be with God. I'm done trying to meet my own qualifications and standards. I'm done trying to be perfect right away. I'm done. I just want relationship with you. God, I pray anyone could respond and anyone could belong with you and recognize that you are enough. In your incredible name, amen. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope it spoke to you. God bless.